Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of This Week in Video Game History. I'm your host, Doug Coleman, and you can catch me streaming on Twitch as The Robust One. On this episode, we are looking at the week of February 2nd through February 8th, and if you love industry drama, this is the week for you. We have endings and massive beginnings. We'll talk about the death of one of the most viral mobile games in history, the corporate end of Sony's MMO empire, and the birth of a game series that answered the question, what would happen if you removed the pool ladder? We have a lot to get to this week, so grab your controller and press start to continue. There were some massive games that came out this week. Every week, we try to go through a quick run-through of some of the major releases that came out. And for my fellow retro game enthusiasts, we travel back this week to the 80s as well. Earlier games are notorious for being very, very fuzzy on their dates. I mean, we didn't really keep track of them back in the day. We get dates like February 1981. That being said, let's look at this week's timeline. February 5th, 2001. Paper Mario hits the Nintendo 64. This game arrived really late in the N64's life as the GameCube would launch later that same year. But it was brilliant. It took the RPG mechanics of Super Mario RPG and flattened the world. The art style has aged better than almost anything else from the N64 era because it wasn't trying to be realistic. February 2nd, 2021. Valheim enters early access. This was the pandemic game for a lot of us. It dropped out of nowhere with a low poly aesthetic and brutal Viking survival mechanic. It sold millions within weeks. It was one of those lightning in a bottle moments where the co-op was exactly what people needed at that specific time. February 8th, 2024, Helldivers 2. A more recent hit, this game launched and immediately suffered from success. Their servers melted down because nobody, not even the devs, expected hundreds of thousands of people to sign up for managed democracy on day one. It proved that a solid AA price point and a fun co-op loop can beat out the biggest AAA marketing budget.
No! Sweet liberty! No!
February 1981, Williams Electronics released Defender to arcades, though the specific day is lost to history. If you were there, you remember how intimidating this machine was. It had 5 buttons, for crying out loud. It was intimidating for a young kid who cut his teeth on Space Invaders and Pac-Man. It was the Elden Ring of 1981. It was brutal, it was fast, and it introduced side-scrolling to the masses. When it would get ported a year later, it would become the Atari 2600's second biggest selling game of 1982 behind Pac-Man and end up as 6th all-time, even though it flickered badly. February 2nd, 1988. Contra lands on the NES in North America. While the exact day is debated, as some sources listed as February 2nd, others listed as February 9th, it is widely accepted that Contra arrived around this week. This absolute legend debuted and became an instant classic. It started the era where game companies purposely made a game too difficult to beat in a single weekend, and the term rental difficulty became a thing. It also popularized the now famous Konami code: up, up, down, down, left, right, BA, start. Fun fact, that code was originally created for the game Gradius, but Contra made it famous because the game was so brutally hard without those 30 extra lives. Now, let's look at the business side of it. You see, this week we feature 2 massive endings in our industry. First up, we go back to February 2nd, 2015. For decades, Sony Online Entertainment, or SOE, was a titan. They gave us EverQuest, Star Wars Galaxies, and PlanetSide. But on this day, Sony surprisingly sold the entire division to an investment firm called Columbus Nova. Overnight, SOE ceased to exist. They rebranded as Daybreak Game Company. It was a shock because it really signaled Sony giving up on the PC MMO market to focus entirely on the PlayStation brand. For those of us who grew up raiding in Norath, it was the end of an era. One year earlier, on February 8th, 2014, we saw a different kind of ending. This was the day the bird died. I'm talking about Flappy Bird. If you weren't online in 2014, it's hard to explain the hysteria. A simple one-tap game developed by Don Nguyen became a global obsession. It was making reportedly $50,000 a day in ad revenue. But on February 8th, Nguyen tweeted, "I'm sorry, Flappy Bird users. 22 hours from now, I will take Flappy Bird down. I cannot take this anymore." And he actually did it. He pulled the plug because the fame and the addictive nature of the game was too much. It resulted in this brief, insane period where iPhones with Flappy Bird installed were listed on eBay for thousands of dollars. It remains one of the only times a developer has voluntarily walked away from a winning lottery ticket for the sake of their own peace of mind. We cannot talk about this particular week in video game history without talking about the very large elephant in the room. You see, on this particular week, one of the biggest franchises in video game history made its debut. I'm talking about February 4th, 2000. Maxis released The Sims on PC in North America. It is impossible to overstate how risky this game was. Will Wright, the creator, had to fight to get it made. The executives at Maxis and EA didn't get it. They called it a toilet game because, well, you had to tell your characters to go to the bathroom. They thought, where's the win condition? Who wants to play a game about doing chores? Turns out, nearly everyone. It became the best-selling PC game of all time for years. It bridged the gap between hardcore gamers and casual players. It gave us a language, Simlish, and it gave us the sadistic joy of trapping a sim in a room full of fireplaces and wooden furniture. But technically, it was a marvel for AI for the year 2000. The way the Sims interacted with objects and fulfilled their needs hierarchies based on Maslow's hierarchy of needs was revolutionary. It proved that video games didn't need guns or high scores to be engaging. They just needed to be a good sandbox. From the streets of SimCity to the forests of Valheim, this has been your week in video game history. Join us next week as we take a deep dive into one of the pioneers of video game history and talk about some of the great releases that came out that week as well. I can't wait to see you. I am your host, Doug Coleman. And don't forget to save your game, and I'll see you next week.